So it's 5, and I think we're gonna start now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Edwards. I am the marketing manager from Norwood House Press, an imprint of Rosen Publishing Group, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Thank you for joining us. This is part 2 of our 3-part webinar series, and today's webinar is titled All Text Has a Purpose, so why focus on decodables? Before we get started, let's cover some quick housekeeping items. Everyone is muted, but if you have any questions about what you see or hear, you can ask them by using the Q&A window or the chat box at any time during the presentation. If time allows at the end of the webinar, then I'll read off any questions to our very talented presenter, Emily Nudds, and she'll answer them. If we happen to run out of time and we can't answer all the questions live, then we'll get in touch with you and provide you with the answers. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome Emily Nudds. Emily, you're on.
Hi, everybody. If you attended our first session in September, welcome back. And if you're here for the first time with us this afternoon, I want to welcome you. I'm sure that everybody attending this seminar has heard of decodables. It's definitely a huge buzzword right along with the science of reading. So this afternoon, we're going to explore why decodables are a necessary component in a structured literacy lesson and how they support brain-based reading. My name is Emily Nudds. I'm a literacy coach in Rush Henrietta, which is a school district in the suburb of Rochester, New York. This is my 20th year teaching and my 9th year as a literacy coach. I'm also a certified local letters facilitator for Rush Henrietta, which has allowed me to build my own knowledge of the science of reading while also sharing this knowledge with my colleagues as we make the shift in my district from balanced literacy to a more structured literacy approach. So this is, as Jocelyn mentioned, the second webinar in a 3-part series. Our first webinar focused on making the shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy. Balanced literacy has had a strong hold in our education system for decades. Let's begin by discussing why we're making this important shift to structured literacy. In 1997, at the direction of Congress and also the Department of Education, the National Reading Panel conducted a major report on literacy in the United States. And from that report, they came up with 5 major findings. The first finding is that the explicit teaching of phonemic awareness skills significantly improves reading in students more than when there's instruction that lacks phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is an area that has not really been focused on for a really long time. And so this finding is definitely super important. Their second finding was that systematic phonics instruction produced significant benefits for early readers. It helped to increase word recognition, spelling, and comprehension. So that phonics instruction really did lead to that ultimate goal of comprehension. They also found that fluency is critical for reading comprehension. Unfortunately, it was an area of instruction that was often neglected. Their fourth finding is that reading comprehension is complex and it's an active process that really does benefit from direct instruction. And then finally, they found that vocabulary knowledge is incredibly important for reading comprehension. So some may wonder, if this information has been around for 23 plus years, why there's such a large movement now. Although this information has been available for so long, it was only more recently that Emily Hanford, who's an educational reporter, released her article that's titled Hard Words, Why Aren't Kids Being Taught to Read? And just last year, she released her podcast, Sold a Story, which really brought to light the power that a large publishing company, along with a few authors, had on the market. The information was there, but it was essentially being ignored. Hanford's stories, along with the increase in letters training for my district, really has brought this information into the spotlight. And of course, when we know better, we do better. So here you can see a graphic that's used to show those 5 pillars of literacy according to the National Reading, the findings of the National Reading Panel. Each are a major contributor to proficient reading, and without any one of these, proficient reading will not occur. So why are we focusing on decodables? Along with the findings of the National Reading Panel, we know from the simple view of reading that there are 2 major factors that contribute to reading comprehension. We've got word recognition and language comprehension. Both of those factors need to be incredibly strong in order for the product of reading comprehension. We are going to be focusing on word recognition today. So Hollis Scarborough further expanded these factors with the reading rope, which shows us that language comprehension factor, is actually made up of further strands: background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. And all of those things need to be directly taught. And then you can see on the bottom here, word recognition is comprised of phonological and phonemic awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. Sight recognition is the ultimate goal with word recognition skills. We need our readers to be accurate and automatic with their word reading as if by sight. Keith Rayner's eye movement research has taught us that readers perceive and process every single letter when they are reading. It just happens in about 250 milliseconds, which is of course incredibly fast. And when this happens, the cognitive load is lessened and allows for comprehension to occur. So we need word recognition skills to be at the automatic level in order to facilitate that comprehension. So how do we get the reader to the automatic level of word recognition? How do we build that automaticity? Here you can see an image of the brain, and you'll notice that it is the left-hand side of the brain because there are 4 major areas of the brain that are involved in reading, and they are located in that left hemisphere, which is responsible for language. Reading is of course a language-based activity. So the first area of the brain that is responsible for reading is in that frontal lobe. And that is something that we call the phonological processor. And that processor is responsible for both perceiving and articulating sounds in spoken language. The next area is back in the occipital lobe, and that is the orthographic processor. And that's the part of your brain that is responsible for noticing letters and letter patterns. That's the part of the brain that takes in the letters that you see on the page, so that when your eyes see the page, it recognizes that those lines and squiggles on a page are actually letters, and they're not just lines and squiggles. Well, from there, the third area that's involved is really what we call this bridge in between the phonological processor and the orthographic processor. And that's where those sounds of spoken language are associated with symbols. So when we're building automaticity in our readers, we need to be providing them with instruction that connects that phonological processor in the front of the brain to that orthographic processor in the back. And we need the chemical reactions that are firing in between those processors to be happening at such a rapid rate. And eventually, once we've built that bridge so strong, letters and their sounds, patterns and their sounds, and then eventually whole words are stored right in the visual word form area, which is in that back of the brain. And when that occurs, that's when meaning is made. So that next area, the language comprehension part of the brain, is activated. So once readers are able to get the words off the page in such a rapid and automatic way, then they can make meaning from what it is that they're reading. So in order for meaning and context processor to activate, the pathways have to be so strong and automatic that your mental energy can be put towards comprehending. So how do we build those pathways? Well, we do that through a structured literacy lesson. Those lessons need to be explicit, systematic, sequential, and cumulative. And those lessons are really focused, again, today in that word recognition area. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to briefly walk through a structured phonics lesson today, but please consider registering for our third session, which will walk through a lesson more closely. We'll really break down the different components of a structured literacy phonics lesson, and you'll be able to see some activities that you can use with students for each of these components. But as we learned from the National Reading Panel findings, explicit instruction and phonemic awareness skills significantly improves reading more than instruction that lacks it. So I begin every single lesson with a phonemic awareness warm-up that focuses on the sounds that students will encounter during the decoding and encoding part of their lesson. I like to think about phonemic awareness lessons as creating these mental parking spots of sounds within words that eventually, once we get to the decoding and encoding part of our lesson, we'll be able to park those letters and their sounds right in those mental parking spots. So if we're working on reading CVC words, our phonemic awareness warm-up focuses on orally manipulating sounds in CVC words. From there, we move on to the decoding and encoding part of the lesson. So this is really that phonics part of the lesson. Here's where we're going to engage the orthographic processor along with the phonological processor and build that bridge that's necessary for storage of graphemes in the and words in the visual word form area. And we're going to do this by first reviewing the previous day's lesson. It's very important when we are teaching phonics skills to review lessons that have already been taught, because again, we're really trying to get our students to work towards that automatic level. And that's only going to happen if we are consistently reviewing what's already been taught. After that review part, then we're going to introduce a new concept. Now, what you're looking at here is a review of consonant, vowel, consonant words using all short vowels. So you're going to see a lot of different graphemes in here. But during the introduction piece, you will model some blending and segmenting of words. This is really what we call the I do portion of the lesson, where the teacher is doing a lot of the work and the students are watching. So the teacher is modeling the correct way to do the work while the students are watching. And then from there, you move into the guided practice, or the we do portion of the lesson. And this is where you are, again, building words with tiles, for students to read. You're asking students to encode words, maybe on a whiteboard, but you're really doing this together. So the teacher's modeling the work while the students are also doing their own work in their own space, but they have the teacher model to really check their own work so we can make sure that they are accurate in their decoding and their encoding. And from there, you move into the extended practice part, the you do portion of the lesson. So this is where we are providing students with opportunities to practice the work on their own. And while students are practicing on their own, the teacher is able to pull small groups and really target the skills of individual or small groups of students. It's really important during the guided practice and also the extended practice part that the teacher is available to provide that immediate corrective feedback so that students are practicing this work correctly and that they are not creating poor habits by practicing incorrectly. So it's really, really important that during this time, teachers are providing that feedback. And then finally, we get to the application piece. So this is an area that was often omitted in the past. If I think back to some of my balanced literacy teachings of the past, I absolutely taught some phonics skills, but they were sort of by the way, or maybe I would teach a phonics skill here and there. But when it came to applying in connected text, that just really wasn't a part of the lesson. It wasn't commonly found within lessons. Well, now we know how important it is that students are able to apply their learning in connected text because providing students with the opportunity to apply their skills in connected text allows them to see the purpose for all of this skills work that they've done. So they've done all of this isolated work of both decoding and encoding sounds, and then words, and then possibly phrases or sentences. When we get them into these decodable books, they're able to then apply this learning and see that there was true purpose behind their learning. The purpose of decodable text is to practice the skills that have been taught. You're going to find that early readers might have simple storylines due to limited controlled text. However, in a cumulative series, as skills are acquired, you'll see that decodables quickly pick up their rigor, allowing for activation of the meaning and context processors. What you'll see in front of you here is an example of level text. So back in our balanced literacy days, level text was something that we would use every day with students. So when I think about some of those lessons, some of those phonics lessons that I did in the past, I may have taught my students that SH makes the sh sound, and then provided them some practice building and reading words that have that SH pattern in them. But then when it came time to apply this learning in connected text, I would provide them with a level text. This text right here is a very typical level text for a beginning first grader. But you can see here that the words that contain SH, so here I am asking my students to apply their learning now in connected text. The two words that are available for them to apply that learning to contain spelling patterns that they haven't yet learned. So in the word sheep and in the word shy, we've got spelling patterns that haven't been taught in the scope and sequence yet. SH is normally taught very quickly after teaching consonant vowel consonant words, not vowel teams like you would see in sheep, or Y is a vowel as you see in the word shy. So where decodable text provides the opportunities to apply skills that level text can't, you can see here that this just does not allow that application. I also think back to those times that I had students that were pulled out for reading intervention, and our interventionists were providing this amazing instruction in decoding that my students were just, flourishing with. And then they would sit with me at my guided reading table, and I would give them a level text, and they couldn't read it because the text that I was giving them just didn't have the patterns that they've learned. And so I would say to my reading teachers, I know you're telling me that they're doing well with you, but they're really just not allowed, they're not able to apply it, in the books in my classroom. And that's why it wasn't the readers and it wasn't the intervention instruction. It was truly the books that I was putting in front of them. But again, when we know better, we do better. So if you look at the next slide, we've got an example of a decodable text that would have been a better fit after teaching that SH blend. So in this story, Chet and Shan find shells. You can see that there are multiple opportunities for readers to apply their new knowledge of that SH digraph in a word like Shan or shells or ship, which are all consonant vowel consonant words. So they're all very accessible for students. The decodable text serves as a major purpose when instructing word recognition, as it allows readers to apply the skills that they've been working on in connected text, and again, build that automaticity and fluency that is absolutely necessary for reading comprehension. So, I know that decodable text is such a huge buzzword now, along with the science of reading. And so sometimes there's this message that gets out there that early readers should only be exposed to decodable text, and that's absolutely not the message that we want to give. We've explained that decodable text serves a very specific purpose, that application of the skills that you've taught during your explicit phonics lessons, but other texts are available that also serve a purpose. So you can see here that predictable text is a text that we're all very familiar with. The sentences are very, very predictable because they're repeated over and over again. In this book, A New Baby for Dear Dragon, the text reads, "The baby is here, the new baby has a home." On the next page, it would say, "The new baby has a," and then we would fill it in with a blanket. "The new baby has a pacifier," and so on. These texts are great for pre-alphabetic readers to learn about patterns and word boundaries. They're also really fun for young readers to pretend read, because once you've taught them the predictable pattern, they can pretend as if they're reading right along with you. Level texts, which we are all very familiar with, are really great for readers once they have reached a consolidated alphabetic phase. So once they've stored enough words in that visual word form area by building that bridge between the phonological and orthographic processor, once they've got that large storage of words in their visual word form area, readers can absolutely read level text. Leveled text is really great for building vocabulary, for building background knowledge. But if you are using it with a student who is not yet able to decode, you're just going to want to read it aloud to them, or you're going to want to supply them with any of the words that they don't know. Don't expect that they're able to decode these words and comprehend when they haven't yet learned those spelling patterns. Authentic text is of course fabulous for read alouds. It's really great for teaching syntax and academic language structures. It's also good for building background knowledge, and of course they're really fun to read aloud to kids as well. And then we've got content specific text, which obviously is really good for building that content knowledge, for that background knowledge, and also building vocabulary. So this application in connected text not only gives purpose to skills work, but it builds automaticity and fluency with decodables. But these other texts are available and should be used to build those language comprehension strands. So whenever you are selecting a text, the main thing to keep in mind is, what is the purpose of this text? How am I using it? And if I am using it to help my kids apply their decoding skills, I want to make sure that I'm providing them with a quality decodable text that only contains the skills that they've already learned. So some of the big ideas that we have talked about today is that automaticity is absolutely necessary for comprehension. And it's our job as teachers of early readers to help our students build their decoding skills up to that automatic level. Again, that eye movement research that I mentioned by Keith Rayner shows us that we have to be able to read the words at about that our eyes read these words at about 250 milliseconds. So that's incredibly fast. So in order for us to be able to get to that comprehension level, we have to have that automaticity. So it's our job to build that within our readers. And the way that we do that is through systematic instruction. Our systematic instruction absolutely has to include phonemic awareness to create those mental parking spots, followed by phonics so that we can fill in those parking spots with the graphemes that match the sounds, and we can work on our morpheme work and our meaning work. And then finally, we need to give our students the opportunity to apply those skills in that connected decodable text. Decodable text is what's going to allow for that application. So we need to make sure that we are providing that for our students. We always need to keep in mind that language comprehension is also crucial. So although right now we're focused on word recognition, we always want to keep in mind how important language comprehension is to reading comprehension. And so the main idea that we want you to understand is to consider the purpose of your lesson when you're selecting text. And when you're selecting text to help your students build that automaticity, you're going to want to choose decodables that allow for that application. So next month, we are going to dive more into an explicit phonics lesson plan, and we're going to be able to see what it looks like in action. But in between now and then, if anybody has any questions on the content of this webinar, or if you ever just want to geek out on talking about literacy instruction, you are more than welcome to email me. You can see that my email is pretty easy to follow here, emilynudds@gmail.com, and you can feel free to reach out to me at any time to talk about literacy. So I want to thank you all for being with us today. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in our chat box, and Jocelyn and Jim will help us out.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much, Emily, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We do have a couple questions. Will we be able to view this recording after the session is complete? Yes, you will. Sometime this week, we're going to try to get this out to everybody in an email. Part 1, if you missed it, that's already up on Norwood House Press's YouTube channel. That was called The Science of Reading and Structured Literacy. This will eventually go up there too, but you guys will get it first. Let's see. Here's another question. Where do sight words fit into this type of plan? Do you recommend adding in sight word practice to literacy lessons / homework?
This is such a wonderful question. So Sight words. So I am going to ask that we sort of shift our thinking of that term sight words. What we used to refer to as sight words, we now want to call high frequency words or irregularly spelled high frequency words. And here's why. When we're thinking about word recognition, we want students to be able to read any word as if by sight. So even words that have predictable patterns or if the words that have expected sounds in them can be sight words once they're stored in the visual word form area. But when we're talking about high frequency word instruction, that absolutely fits into this plan. And what we do is we want to make sure to teach our students that in a high frequency word, there are parts that are expected and there are parts that are unexpected. So for example, in the word the, T-H-E, TH makes a very expected sound, right? It's a digraph and it can be either voiced when it says v or unvoiced when it says in the word the, it's voiced, but that's very expected. The only unexpected part in the word the, initially anyways, until you learn that E can make a schwa sound in later grades. But early on, the unexpected part is that E, because students have learned that E says eh or E, and in the word the, it says So when we're talking about high frequency word or irregularly spelled trick words, sometimes we call them, if you follow an approach where you're having students map out those sounds, and I will be sure to include that in our next webinar when we walk through the lesson, but if you teach them to map out the sounds and recognize which parts are expected and which parts are unexpected, that's how it can fit into the instruction. Because again, that eye movement research showed us that when we're reading, we really are taking in every single letter and every single sound. So in the past, when we used to teach students to memorize sight words as wholes, we were really working against the brain instead of with the brain. So again, I will be sharing a type of lesson that you can do when teaching trick words in the next session.
Okay, we do have a couple more.
Great.
So here's another one. Are these phonics lessons developed by you for decodable texts you own, or are these part of a specific program?
So the lesson plan that you saw on your screen, I did develop, and that was developed using the decodables that are being sold by Norwood House Press that I also helped develop. So take a peek at them because I think they're fabulous. However, the lesson plan format is a very widely agreed upon lesson plan format that's based on the ideas of the science of reading and structured literacy. So again, if they have that phonemic awareness warm up, followed by the phonics word work at the sound, word, sentence, phrase and sentence level, and then that application into connected text. If you do have a program in your school that you're following, that you will likely find that if it is research based and if it is brain science aligned, it's going to follow a very similar structure. So I do have a separate program that I use in my school. However, these lesson plans that I've created, they follow a similar format and a similar structure, and can certainly be used whole group, small group, and so on.
Okay. We also have another question. With older students, 4th to 5th grade, that may not need decodables, how do we select appropriate text without assigning a leveled text?
So if we're talking about 4th or 5th graders that are still struggling with decoding and you have taught them, again, you're teaching them those certain phonics patterns, then you are going to want to provide them with a decodable text to apply those skills. If you're talking about a 4th or 5th grader that has really strengthened that visual word form area of their brain and they're in that more consolidated alphabetic phase, then you can go ahead and select some level text. If you have a lot of experience with level text, though, I think you'll notice that the difference between the levels is really just the length of the words and the length of the sentences. So you might have a student that's able to read a level L text, a level M text, a level N text, let's say, and they can read them all just about the same. What's really going to separate them is their knowledge of the topic that they're reading about. So that's where that knowledge building comes in. So it's not inappropriate to use leveled text with older readers if they're able to access it. However, if they are struggling readers, even if they are in a bigger body, if they're at the early reading phase, you're going to want to provide them with decodables that help them apply what you've taught them during their intervention time.
Okay. And then just one more question. Does this model work for bilingual programs?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Certainly with our bilingual learners, we want to make sure that we are, of course, building in extra vocabulary instruction, because we know that that is just one more component that they are really, really learning. So although vocabulary instruction is important for our bilingual and multilingual learners, it's even more so important. You would definitely want to tweak some things. So for example, if you're teaching CBC words and you are having students decode the word pot, then you're going to want to have a picture of a pot with that as well. Maybe a little card, or, have your phone right there so that you can Google images right away, so that your reader is not only decoding the word, but they're also connecting it to the meaning of the word. There are little tweaks that you can do here and there that help support your multilingual learners. But certainly our multilingual learners do need to break the code of the alphabetic language as well. And so these lessons are absolutely appropriate for them.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I think that we're gonna end the webinar now, but again, please be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us with information on how to register for part 3 of our webinar series, and links to where you can watch this webinar again. Thank you so much again, Emily. Thank you all, and everyone have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.